Get started then. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Mission Driven Made podcast. We have an awesome guest today, so make sure you stay until the end. Our guest is the owner of BK Strength, is a Nike Chicago trainer, a lifelong martial artist, a former professional baseball player, and two-sport D1 collegiate athlete, also is the author of Walked On. I want to welcome Brian Kent to the High Achieving Community and Mission Driven Made podcast. Thank you for being on the show, Brian.
You're welcome, Jacob. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You were one of the guests too, just, reading about your story and seeing your resume. I was like, we're not going to be able to get everything in. There's just so much.
It's been quite a process. So I was hoping that when I wrote the book, which is what's sort of been it's bumped around a little bit the last few months, that it could at least start the conversation of how, what that story looks like from my perspective as a two-sport college walk-on and an undrafted minor league baseball player. So Some people have easier routes, some people have more difficult routes, and I was hoping, at least from the book's perspective, that it would help kids stay locked into goals when life gets hard, because it will get hard.
Yeah, I definitely think we need more stories about the hardship part of, finding success.
For sure. It's easy to see like a movie like the baseball movie with The Rookie, where he's a washed out pitcher. He's teaching high school science, coaching baseball, shows up at a baseball tryout, throws, 96, gets reacclimated into pro baseball and all the way up to the big leagues, which is not, it's a great story. I mean, I love it, but it's not really the path that most of us would get to follow.
You know what? I just realized when you said The Rookie, I was like, oh, I've seen that movie before, but I think I'm thinking of Rookie of the Year, which is another classic.
A Chicago sports icon. You got the Chicago Cubs hiring Henry Rollingardner, the 12-year-old pitcher who can throw 100. So only a woeful franchise like the Cubs would bring a kid in to help solidify the pitching rotation.
Wait, so remind me, what's who's in the Rookie movie? I can't remember if I've seen that one or not.
It's Dennis Quaid. I believe it's a Disney movie where his path is, he's an old guy by the time he gets called up to the big leagues, and I think he's with Tampa at the time. So it's inspiring for the old guys to see, how his career. He's trying to pay bills at home. He leaves his solid job behind to go back to the minor leagues, and he's not always well received by his teammates because he's an old guy. So it's a good story, but it wasn't quite mine.
Okay, gotcha. And so I kind of wanted to get started with just hearing your story about becoming a D1 collegiate two-sport athlete, and then how you walked onto those teams. I know you have a lot of stuff in your story before that, but I feel like this will be kind of a good jumping off point.
Sure. So I grew up just outside Chicago in Downers Grove, Illinois, which is about 20 miles southwest. My high school program was Downers Grove South, which was a extremely disciplined public school from a sports standpoint. So we had about 3,200 kids in the school at that time. And I believe in the book, it says, Wikipedia says the average ACT score is 22. So we had some kids that were pretty smart, some kids that weren't that smart. And it was kind of like a melting pot of a lot of different personalities. My two sports were football and baseball. So my dad was a high school teacher and coach in the building where I went. And it was important to me at a young age to be good at what I did. And around maybe freshman or sophomore year, I set a goal for myself of I wanted to be a major league catcher and a Division I Big Ten fullback linebacker. So obviously those are big goals, and not everybody can do that. But I thought, well, okay, if I'm going to do it, you have to make sacrifices. You can't be like everybody else. So at times you have friends, right? So you can play sports because your friends play sports, but when your goals are bigger, sometimes you have to choose who you hang out with, because if your friends are doing things that are, whether it's drinking or smoking or things that were not like the program, I saw my buddies kind of get kicked off teams, and I'm like, well, I can't do that. So I need to make sure that my focus is on my goals, and I have big ones. So I gotta figure out how to make that happen. So I played football and baseball in high school. My dad was one of my main coaches. I had great high school coaches at South. We had 5 of those coaches were in the Illinois High School Football Coaches Hall of Fame. And it was a disciplined program for sure. I mean, we could not say yeah. it had to be yes or yes, sir, or else we ran. And we learned right away that, discipline can make up for talent. If you have a great team that's undisciplined, you jump off sides on third and short. It doesn't matter how good you are if you don't have that discipline. So we had discipline instilled in us pretty early on. And I had a decent high school career, but when it came time for college, I had a hard time deciding which sport to play. And as a football, obviously you need to have a certain size. I wasn't quite that big yet. Maybe my senior year, I was about 6'2", about 200, kind of about the same size I am now, but maybe a softer 200. And I had a chance I was recruited by the University of Iowa to walk on to the football team with a chance to also be a scholarship catcher on the baseball team. So I thought, holy shit, like this is everything that I want. I get a chance to play football at Iowa. I have a chance to be a scholarship catcher at Iowa. 2 sports, 1 school, like the journey continues. So that was sort of how I got to Iowa. They recruited me there, but it didn't quite happen the way I thought it would happen once I got there.
So going into that, I know you had big goals of doing both, but was there one sport that was more important to you?
It depended what season it was. If it was football, it was the fall, right? If it was baseball, it was the spring. Summer was for both. And I love Bo Jackson, right? And he played 2 sports, so why can't I do it? So I was definitely looking back on it now as an adult. It's pretty insane to try to do both at that high of a level. But as 17, 18-year-old, there's no way you could have told me otherwise. But that did hurt me a little bit because I felt like some of the baseball scouts were turned off that I was playing college football, and some of the college football coaches were turned off that I was playing baseball. So that was a tricky road to navigate at the time. But I was probably a better, shouldn't say that. At least with football, I could play multiple positions. Baseball as a catcher, I could really only catch. I wasn't that great at baseball other than catching. I shouldn't say I was great at catching. I was a good catcher, but I couldn't play anywhere else. I couldn't play third. I couldn't play outfield. But football, I could play tight end. I could play linebacker. So I would say even now as a grown man, I'm like, which one did I like more? It's hard. I was probably a better baseball player, but I think I liked football more.
Gotcha. And you'd mentioned how you were recruited there. Was that by 2 separate recruiters for baseball and football? Is that kind of how that worked?
Yes. So each program was recruiting me separately. And I was on a visit there during my senior year of high school. And the baseball coach basically said that I was one of the final finalists for a catching scholarship. And football and basketball give full rides, where baseball only gives partials. So it was understood that if Iowa was to offer me the catching scholarship, then I could play football and baseball for 1 year. And if football offered me a scholarship at that time, okay, that changes the game a little bit. But if football was not paying for my school and baseball was, I was expected to choose baseball after that 1 year. So each of those programs were recruiting me, knowing that the other one was also recruiting me too. The baseball, I thought it was very fortunate that I was given a chance to do both. But a couple of coaching changes later, and one, mononucleosis turned that around real quick.
And so when you show up to both sports, is it different for you versus, someone that has a scholarship or in baseball has a partial? I mean, is your mentality I guess the better way to put this would be, are you treated different, or are the coaches harder on you, or are you the same as everyone else in that position?
So I never felt inferior in any way. I knew that as a walk-on that it's a little bit harder of a path, right? They're not really paying for you. And there's guys that are playing your position that they are paying for. So I never really thought of myself as at any point being an inferior talent or an inferior, having inferior ability. So, but as a football player, so I got to Iowa City and I had mono, and I was down to 183 pounds, which is not big enough to play Big Ten football. So I looked like a baseball player, or maybe even like a student manager, versus a hulking, big neck roll, thick football player. So I guess right before I graduated high school, the head baseball coach at Iowa retired abruptly. And so when he retired, along went potential scholarship. So I get to Iowa as a football player because I'd already committed to walking onto the program, and I'm sick and I'm little and I'm playing catch up from day one. In the meantime, the new Iowa baseball coach would not let me play baseball because I was on the football team. And I'm thinking, well, I'm too small for football. I'm not allowed to play baseball because I'm on the football team. Like, but if I want to be a major league catcher, why am I playing college football? Especially if I'm 30 pounds away from where I need to be. I don't even know if that's attainable for my frame. I'm 6'2". I guess never in my life. I think 215 is most I've ever weighed. So I don't know if 230 or being that big was ever in my cards, which is probably the baseball god saying, "See, Brian, we told you, should have picked baseball from the beginning." But that's why I had to leave Iowa to continue playing college baseball elsewhere.
In a mono, that's like weeks or even months of illness, isn't it?
So they call it the kissing disease, right? It's like, I don't know how I got it. I have a couple ideas how I got it, but basically I learned early on, like, you have to take days off, right? That summer before Iowa City, before I reported to camp, I was training for football. I was playing summer baseball on a team where I was not yet in college, but all the other guys were in college. I was taking a chemistry class. I was pushing it hard. I wasn't really eating well or sleeping enough, and it catches up to you. You can't be 100 miles an hour all the time without that rest and recovery and nutrition. Which, yeah, I think high school kids can probably get by with eating crap more often than adults can. But if you're trying to gain weight, you can't put. I know you're in Arizona. This is not applicable to you, but you can't make the snowman any bigger unless you put more snow on him, right? So when I got sick, it definitely was putting me behind the eight ball in terms of where I needed to be physically to play college football and where I actually was. I mean, I would look in the mirror, I'm like, whoa, like, who's that skinny guy? Who's that skinny, handsome guy looking back at me? Because like, it did not look like the frame of a guy that was, playing a high contact position as a fullback.
Gotcha. And I know part of your story and sports, at least for a while in general, were also shattered because of a rotator cuff injury and then surgery. Can you kind of talk about what happened with all of that?
Sure. So I left Iowa City and I moved myself to the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, which was a Big 12 school at the time. I had played summer ball with a guy that went there, and that's a separate story, chapter in the story. I liked my teammates. I met my then girlfriend, now wife there. We had great teams, but the head coach and I didn't quite see eye to eye on my role with the team. And he, I never had coaches. I had great coaches all my life. Football coaches at Iowa were great. My high school baseball and football coaches were great, but I got to Nebraska and I had a different relationship with the head coach. And he basically thought I sucked, and it tore me down in ways that I had never been talked to before, which I didn't want to leave Lincoln because these are my buddies. And two of those teams went to the College World Series during that time. My roommate was in the major leagues with the Royals a few years later. So this was a talented squad, and I'm right there with him, in my opinion. So once he was quite clear that I would never play for him or anybody in his mind, I had to leave for a second transfer, and I switched to the University of Nebraska, Omaha, which was a Division II school about 50 miles from Lincoln. It was there I was offered a scholarship. I got a scholarship, finally, partial, of course, but it's like, okay, we're rolling here. And into my junior year, like the first couple of weeks, I'm like, God, my arm is hurting me. Baseball players know that arm injuries are major in the sport. So you're always doing like your exercises, your rotator cuff, your Job series. So I did all that, but it got to the point where I couldn't throw. And as a catcher, like my sort of what made me stand out was defense. I was a good defender. I could throw. I could pick people off. I could throw guys out stealing. And now I couldn't throw the ball back to the pitcher. I'm like, man, something's wrong. And it was stressing me because I was playing like crap. My goal again was to play Major League Baseball. I'm playing like crap in a Division II college with an arm that's killing me. It's like, whoa, this is not how I saw my career going. It was hard to stay positive when it felt like I kept, being flushed down the toilet. So eventually I lost that scholarship. They pulled it from me. I was injured. I had shoulder surgery on September 11th, 2001, which people will remember that date for a different reason. And 18 months of rehab later, I was finally able to get back on the field. So I joked that, college for me was 5 years, 3 schools, 2 sports, a surgery, and an illness.
Oh my gosh. It was it a full tear in your rotator cuff?
Yes, I think they had to shrink the capsule, and I had a little cleanup as well. So I had like these 3 holes in my shoulder from the scope. I actually was hoping for like a really thick scar, but I'm like, oh, these little tiny holes, like that's it after all this. But the rehab was like the hardest part, right? Because I could look in the mirror and see how much atrophy had occurred, and I was used to being relatively muscular. I'm like, I can't even lift up 3 pounds with my throwing arm. How I lost my scholarship, and I'm sitting here in Omaha, pissed that my teammates from Lincoln are in the College World Series. Like I'm doing shit, and it was hard to. I was happy for them, but I was mad for me. So those were some challenging times for Brian.
And I have to ask you, with all the shoulder stuff you've been through, have you ever used crossover symmetry before?
I didn't learn about that until I became a trainer. So the concept at the time was like, oh well, why would I make one side stronger and not the other? But when you see like how the research shows that you can work that good arm and it strengthens the bad arm, like that, or leg, or whatever limb we're talking about here, like that is an amazing concept that was not really part of rehab in 2001, 2002. Also, back then you would take your anti-inflammatories, which was like Celebrex or Vioxx, without being aware that my diet was full of inflammation with milk and drinking pop and all kinds of crap that I didn't need in my system for healing. So it was a different method of rehab back in those days. But to your point, no, that was a whole new concept that I didn't learn until I became a sort of a halfway decent trainer. I'm like, oh wow, that would have been helpful for me back in 01. So
Yeah,
yes,
I just asked because I have arthritis in my left shoulder, and I would start with crossover symmetry for 5 or 10 minutes before I would go and train. And that thing, at least for me, it was like magic. And I'm not really, normally into like gimmicky type stuff, but that like allowed my shoulder to feel good enough to train. So I had to make sure that I asked you that. So
yeah, definitely.
And then kind of the next question I have for you is, with all this that happened to you, with everything you went through, the 5 years of college, how did you still manage to then go and get a contract with the Chicago White Sox?
So after I got out of shoulder rehab, I played 2 years of low-level minor league baseball, which at that time it was in the independent leagues. So minor leagues have 4 or 5 levels, right? AAA is the highest, AA, then you have high A, then single A, then like rookie ball. So independent league is the lowest in terms of it's not affiliated with any major league team. So each team is independent of a major league organization. So my first year I played for the Gary South Shore Railcats in Gary, Indiana, which is not that far from Chicago, where I was making $750 a month. That was my first year back from surgery. And there are times where I played well, times where I played like crap. And I'm like, God, like this inconsistency is maddening. And we had these long bus rides, which is part of the minor league life. So I read a lot on those trips. I don't like to waste time. I can't just watch. I love stupid movies as much as the next guy, but I can't watch like 10 in a row. I got to do something for my brain. So I was reading a lot of Bruce Lee books about martial art philosophy, and I've done martial arts for a long time. I'm like, man, am I really on the right path here? Like, I'm questioning if I'm doing the right thing with my life, because I'm not. I said my body is in the minor leagues, but I feel like my mind is getting toward the big leagues. I'm like, I need to. How do I make them synced? So my second year, I played for the San Angelo Colts of the Central League, which was down there in Texas, and I had never driven to Texas before. But it's like, wow, that's a whole new world down there. And I made $600 a month on that team. So I got crap money. My bank account is empty. My car gas tank is also close to empty. It's like I have to decide: am I going to have lunch today, or am I going to put some gas in my car? And again, same thing as the year before. There's times where I played well, times where I didn't. I'm like, geez, like it's hard to get out of there. And it really made me think, well, Brian, how bad do you want it? How important is it to you? How far are you willing to push? And what are you willing to sacrifice to get out of here? Like, you really want to do it? What are you going to do to get there? And I would ask myself these questions. And the White Sox thing. So after my second year, I guess my first year of pro ball, I started personal training at Crunch Fitness in downtown Chicago. At the time, Crunch was like one of the leading gyms in the area. And now it's different because you have so many boutique gyms and a lot of options for training. Back then, like there really wasn't as much. It was like big box gym or big box gym. And Crunch was like had a big boxing ring by the windows. It it was fun. I'm like, oh, okay, this is like a cool place to start training. And a couple of years later, after having some success with training, having good clients and good people around me, there was a White Sox scout that joined the gym. His name is David Wilder. He was the White Sox director of player personnel. And he was a young dude, and he was like kind of being groomed to be like the next hotshot general manager somewhere. And they told me it was in the gym, and I'm like, oh, again, being from Chicago, that was right after the White Sox won the World Series in 05. So the Sox are like a premier team, right? Like they're Chicago. We don't have as many championships as we'd like to have, and baseball was like always a sore spot because the Cubs hadn't won it forever. The Sox hadn't won it 88 years. The Jordan era for the Bulls was great, but besides that, there's not much. The Bears had one great year in 1985. There hasn't been much since. The Blackhawks have been pretty good in recent history, but like we're starving for something, and the Sox provided that in 05. Half my friends are Sox fans, half my friends are Cub fans. Family split. There's always all this shit talking. Like it's a fun time to be in baseball, because usually your best friends are the ones that make the meanest jokes, right? So now there's this White Sox scout in the gym, and I was I knew I needed to say something to him, but back then I feel like my communication skills were probably as developed as maybe they are now. So it's like, well, what do I say to this guy? How do I sell myself for a chance? And what if he says no? Could I, like, from having a fragile male ego, like, what if I asked him for help and he laughs, right? Like, ha, no, you're too old, like whatever. I think I was 26 at that time, which isn't super old, but in baseball years, if you haven't been playing for a couple of years, it is kind of old. So David, again, the last day that he was in the gym, like I gathered all my confidence. It was like, I talked about the book, like it's like the girl of your dreams, right? There he is, the supermodel. He's like, oh my God, I want to talk to him. I got to say something. How do I start that conversation? So he was doing squats down there at the rack, and I sort of strutted over there and tried to muster up any confidence I could to start this conversation. And I was wearing a Rail Cats baseball shirt from that year in Gary, and he knew my manager in Gary, which was Gary Templeton. And he's like, oh, did you play for him? I said, yes. And he said, what position do you play? I said, I'm a catcher. He says, well, can you hit? I'm like, oh, I hit left-handed, which is different from most catchers. And he's like, oh, so do you still play? And I said, I would love to. I haven't, but I want to. And he said, do you want to come to spring training next year? And I thought, what? In my mind, I'm like, on the outside, I'm like, yes, sir. Obviously, we learned in high school that we don't say yeah, we say yes or yes, sir. And that was the last time I saw him in the gym. So that must have been September of 06. And that whole rest of the year, I'm like, geez, was he real about this? Because if he was serious and I'm not ready, like I'll never forgive myself. If I'm unprepared, he calls back, like I will never forgive myself for the rest of my life. So I sort of secretly like working out a little bit. I mean, I always had been working out as a trainer, but I was not doing much baseball specific stuff. So when that 07 year came around, I'm like, well, I was playing catch, I was hitting, I was throwing, I was running, I was trying to be ready. And one night I'm on the train going to judo. I get this funny call on my flip phone from an area code in Arizona that I didn't know. So I let it go to voicemail, and I listened to the call, and it's him. He's like, I just want to make sure that you're coming to spring training in a month. I jumped out of my seat like my butt was on fire. I'm like, whoa! Like I called him right back. I was like smashing the phone into my face so I could hear everything he said. I didn't want him to have a chance to change his mind, right, or to find somebody else. And the next day, I had a contract faxed to me at Crunch. I thought, holy shit, like it's real. So that one of the points of the book is like, you have to making the most of opportunities leads to more opportunities. And if you aren't ready, when one comes your way, they'll find somebody else that is. So like, as I say, like that day, signing that contract made those 5 years of college worthwhile. It made all the anger inside me go, like not go away, but like be calmed a bit. And it was before I got married and had a child, like it was by far the best day of my life.
Wait, so up until, okay, so he basically asked if you were interested in spring training, and then he called you from that Arizona number, send you the contract. In between those two times, you guys weren't in contact at all?
Zero. I spoke to him that day in the gym. It was right toward the end of the 2006 season. I never saw him in the gym since. So I don't remember if we exchanged contact numbers. And I did not hear from him again until maybe it was early February of '07. So all those months, I'm like, well, okay. I didn't know if he was being honest about coming to camp or if he was just being polite within a personal conversation. So that's why it goes back to, well, okay, if this is real and I'm not ready, like I can imagine, like, not that I'm the person that sits around eating Cheetos and drinking beer, but I get the call, I'm like, oh no, I've done nothing. But I would never forgive myself for squandering that opportunity. So he had my number or found it somehow. And again, the next day, bam, contract from the Chicago White Sox, faxed to me at my work in the gym in downtown Chicago, a year after the Sox had won the World Series.
I can't even imagine at that point, with everything you went through, what was going through your head as you saw a contract from a professional baseball team. And then, so you get the contract, you sign it. Can you kind of tell me what happens next?
Sure. So I signed the contract, obviously, and we fax it back again. In my brain, like I'm a walkout, I'm undrafted free agent. In my mind, they're looking for 8 guys, right? I'm one of them. So as long as I get my paperwork back quick, like they have to keep me, right? They can't just tell me no. So I had a bunch of clients in the gym that I had to set up with new trainers while I was gone. Everybody was super supportive. My family was unbelievably excited for me because obviously they'd seen like my inconsistent college career and nothing that really went the way I wanted it to go, even how I hoped it would go. So it's like, okay, now I think I was 26, 27 at the time. Like, all right, now is the time, like time to give it all you got. Like we're emptying the tank here to make sure that there's nothing left, no stone left unturned. So I flew to Tucson. The Sox right now they're in Glendale, but at the time they're in Tucson, Arizona. And I walk to the clubhouse, minor league clubhouse, which is full of hundreds of dudes, and I see a jersey with my name on the back, and all of a sudden, like chills like go down my spine. I know you're from California, but in Chicago, like I feel like Chicago is more of like a pro and a high school sports town. We don't have like a college that is super connected to the city. Like Illinois is too far away, Northwestern is too hard to get into, Notre Dame is in Indiana. Like we don't have that in Iowa and Nebraska. Like those kids grow up loving the Hawkeyes or loving the Huskers. So that's a feeling that we don't quite have that connection to here. But a White Sox jersey with my name on the back was the exact. I'm getting chills right now just thinking about it. And it was hanging in a locker. I'm like, holy shit! Like that name is my name, right? I am supposed to be here. So it was cool to have it come together, right? And again, I was an older guy. I was 27, I was 26, turning 27, maybe, or 27, turning 28, one of those. And it was time to go to work, right? I mean, I'm not here to talk about it. I'm here to do it. So again, the guys were from all over the world. You had players from obviously from the United States and Florida, Texas, California, and small towns throughout. You had guys from the Dominican, you had guys from Cuba, you had guys from Puerto Rico, you had guys from Mexico, you had guys from Japan, from Taiwan, Canada. So it really is. That's why it doesn't really matter like what round you're drafted in, what your scholarship was, how much of a signing bonus you got. Like we're all on the same field here. So let's strap it on and let's see who can rise to the top.
And what happened during camp?
So I was assigned to low A ball, which with my age was kind of an odd place for me. But again, they never had seen me play. It had been 2 years since I even had been out there. Right. So I guess, again, 42-year-old Brian looking at it like, oh, it's kind of hard to play baseball when you haven't played in 2 years. You're out of your timing's off. But like, well, that may be true, but that also sounds like an excuse to me. Like you've been doing something your whole life, you should be able to turn it on and do it as long as in your brain, like you've done your mental reps, like you're physically prepared, like you're mentally prepared, you have no injuries. Like we're not making excuses. We're here to make plays. So I was out there with the A ball team, and at that time, AJ Przinsky was the White Sox catcher, the major league catcher, and his backup got hurt during spring training, which sort of created they had to shuffle the deck a little bit, and I was bumped up to AAA camp. Probably for my age was better for him. It's also would have been my 3rd year in pro ball, so like it's more consistent than low A. So I'm in AAA camp. And
AAA is the highest, right?
It's the highest. You're one step away from the major leagues,
right?
And a lot of those guys on that team were eventual major leaguers. So it was a very good team filled with high Sox prospects. And what's funny is a lot of those guys also were dual sport athletes. I'm like, oh, like I'm where I belong. And it was crazy because toward the end of camp, the Major League White Sox were off playing in Atlanta. So the AAA White Sox were playing the Major League Colorado Rockies in Tucson Electric Park. And I'm wearing a pair of like pinstriped white Major League White Sox pants. And I'm going, holy shit. I'm out here dressed for a big league spring training game, wearing Major League pants. A month ago, I was training clients at 5 o'clock in the morning. I had not played baseball in 2 years. Like that fast, things can change, right? And baseball is a pretty humbling sport where you have good days, you have bad days. I think it's really important also, like in life, to sort of, you don't get too high, don't get too low. And as long as you stick to a good process, the results will come. So that's pretty regular with most guys. You have days where you're awesome, days where you're crap. You're like, geez, you're never as good as you think you are, never as bad as you think you are either, right? So I'm seeing the dugout. I'm like, holy shit, I'm in a major league dugout. There's Jim Thome. There's John Garland. All these guys that I've been watching on TV. I'm like, I'm in the same freaking dugout, wearing the same pants as these guys. Clearly, their careers are a lot more established than mine, but it's like you have to be ready for whatever comes next. And while I was released on the last day of camp after a very strange chain of events where I was told that I had made a team, when I was told that I was staying in Arizona, when I was told I was going home, I was told I was going to Chicago, but just not with the White Sox. So it ended oddly and disappointedly, but it was definitely worthwhile to finish the career in that regard.
And so after that, baseball was done at that point. Did you ever get a contract again or kind of pursue it again?
I waited a couple days to see if there was any interest, but as a 27-year-old left-handed catcher that hadn't played in 2 years, I didn't think interest would be super high. I didn't have an agent, and I was proud that I had like a career outside of baseball. I didn't really know what I was going to do. You can't really become a ninja or a superhero outside of the game. So I didn't really know what kind of job I wanted other than playing baseball. So as a trainer, helping out people downtown was like the only job that I really had passion for outside of playing football or baseball or being a ninja or a superhero. So I'm lucky I have a career to go back to. I have passion for my job. Like I'm not going to go back to $600 a month or $750 a month trying to squeeze out whatever's left of my baseball career. So when I was released from the White Sox, I not officially retired, but I'm like, okay, that's probably the end of my career.
And then with all the stuff that happened to you with this setback after setback, like what do you think you did? Maybe this is a mentality question, but how are you able to just keep rebounding like that? Because I feel like with some of your injuries and illness, people would have just stopped right there, or a lot of people would have.
Yeah, that's a good question. And people have asked me that quite a bit. Clients and friends that have read the book, and a lot of them knew part of the story, but not all of it. And that's a question that I've been asked a lot. How do you just keep going? And I guess I'll come back to the same point where I ask myself, well, how bad do you want it? Like, how important is it to you to achieve goals, whatever they are? My goal is to play Major League Baseball, and I'm not there. So I'm pissed. And I don't like not finishing things that I start. So my college career was crap. My independent league career was like kind of crap. So it's like, I'm motivated to keep showing the best version of myself, even though I'm not quite getting the opportunity to do so. And that's a hard part about pro sports and even college sports, is that you think you're good, but maybe your coach thinks that somebody else is better than you. Maybe he recruited him. Maybe he didn't recruit you. And so what are you going to do? Are you going to sit around and pout, or like, how do you get better every day? And how do you stay locked into what your goals are? And again, the process for achieving goals is not linear, right? It's not like a roller coaster up. It's like, it's up, down, backwards, loop-de-loop. Oh, we're falling. It's like the stocks, right? So you have to remember that not everything happens in the order that you want it to happen in.
And it's really obvious you have a high achieving mentality. It's been shown through your life. Do you ever get frustrated when, say, a client or someone comes to you and they don't really have that mindset?
Also a very good question. I think that one of the baseball skills that translates well to training and with clients is, as a catcher, it's my responsibility to know all of my pitchers, right? And everybody is going to be different. Everybody has different motivations. They have different personalities. They have different things. Some guys, you can scream in their face. They need that. Other guys, you need to be a little quieter with them. And I think that is the same skill with clients, because not everybody likes a screamer. Not everybody likes knowing that, okay, Jacob, it's going to be okay that you ate a chocolate cake for lunch. Like, you have to know your people and you have to know how to talk to them in a way to get them to be their best, right? And I feel like personal training and being in this industry is one of the last real jobs where interpersonal communication matters. So if my
100%.
people know that they trust me, they know that my advice is usually pretty good. So that comes with establishing good relationships and knowing that I have their best interest in mind. I hope. Also, as a catcher, it's not about me; it's about my pitcher, right? So, as a catcher, if you see me, it's usually because something's gone wrong, right? I'm chasing balls back to the screen, or I made a crucial error. And I think with clients, it's the same skill. It's really about them, not about me. So if I'm a helper and I think of myself as a helper, then my job is to help you do well. And we'll put a plan together. We'll talk about the ways that we can work together and how I see like the program going. Understanding the same thing. Like there's going to be setbacks too. You're going to have days where you eat great food. You're going to have days where you eat shitty food. You're going to have days where you probably drink too much and days where you don't get much sleep. So we have to modify what we do based on how you're feeling that day. So from a client standpoint, now there's times like we'll make it funny, like, Jacob, how many hot dogs did you eat yesterday at the Bears game?
20 of them.
I'll be like, woo, that's a lot of hot dogs. Like, did you put ketchup on them? Because that's a no-no in Chicago. So yeah, I mean, we'll joke around and I'll say, if you're going to eat them, like, enjoy them. Don't feel bad about it because most of your friends probably do not gather in groups with kale salad, right? There's other food, there's other things that they're going to be eating. So if you're going to do it, enjoy it, then, win the next meal. Like if you had a bad meal, then win the next 3, right? Get your winning percentage back up and you'll feel better and we can get back to our business.
And I'm probably, again, jumping around here in correct order, but can you kind of talk about how BK Strength came to be? Because I know you said you were training in that transition period, but I didn't ask you if that was your brand or your business yet.
So Crunch closed back in 2008. So I was training clients at Crunch downtown. I was there for about 5 years. And then they sort of closed abruptly. And so when they closed, I thought, well, I'm sure you've heard this with other trainers, like in the gym, the gym is getting paid more than the trainers are. I thought I have 5 years of like a fairly consistent clientele. I feel like my reputation is pretty good. I think I'm organized and disciplined enough to go solo as an independent contractor, which is where BK Strength came from back in 2008. So I've been doing BK Strength work as a sole proprietor since then. So what is it now, 2021? So I've been very fortunate that I've had good loyal clients and I've been able to have a consistent clientele pretty much my entire career. I think that it helps to be a person that they want to see in their day, right? I assume that when they come see me, it's the best hour of their day or their week. And much like baseball, whether I'm tired, sore, or beat up, like it doesn't matter. I'm a pro. I got a job to do. My job is to help that person during that hour. So I think that for trainers, remembering that it is about your clients and not about you goes a long way toward making those people feel comfortable and trusting that you have their best interests in mind every time they come in.
And with BK Strength, do you have a kind of specific clientele that you reach out to, or is it, general population, or who do you train over there?
I'll work with anybody. I'll work with anybody that's motivated. I have clients that are elderly. I have clients that are kids, and I like. It makes me feel good helping people. Some people say, "Oh, I only work with athletes." Well, okay, well that's kind of easy. I get just as much satisfaction with maybe an elderly person that doesn't move well, and you can help them when you see them do something for the first time, or they can get off the couch easier, or they can reach with both hands to open the door. Like those are equivalently powerful moments versus someone's vertical jump increasing 2 inches. Like, okay, like I feel like if you are really a helper, then you should be good at your job with any type of client. And I like working with kids. I like working more with like young athletes in terms of helping round out their athletic development because, I think you're 30, right? I'm 42. Like I grew up playing multiple sports. So football was in the fall, basketball was in the winter. My dad coached wrestling, although I did not wrestle, and baseball was in the spring. So there's always like a different flavor of sport. Now, a lot of these kids play their same sport year round. It's like, I love pizza, but if I ate it year round, it wouldn't taste as good if I only ate it once in a while. Right.
Right.
So showing kids how much better they get just by being more well-rounded, developed athletes as opposed to specific players. I'm just a soccer player. I'm just a volleyball player. I'm just a baseball player. So that's also is rewarding to me, is helping someone that's elderly use both hands to open the door.
And I also saw that you're a Nike trainer. What does that entail?
So Nike is awesome. I've been a part of them for I think about 5 years now. There were two projects that started before that where we did years ago. There was a 40th anniversary of Title IX, which is when women's sports became on an equal playing field as men. And I worked at an event for them in Chicago. Well, we're lucky Chicago is a big market, right? If it's not Chicago, we're lucky to be in the right place at the right time. Chicago is a big market. There's a Nike town, Chicago here. It's one of their bigger areas where they to do work in the central region. So I did an event with the 40th anniversary of Title IX. I did remember the Nike fuel bands from a while back? I did a fuel band event for them when those were new, and it morphed into a project where I think it was 2015. They had their Nike Train Chicago event where they built this facility right by the United Center on the near west side of Chicago, where it was like an athletic mecca. You had turf, you had garage door open, you had sleds, you had these racks, you had kettlebells, you had bungees and all kinds of cool stuff. And it was a sport themed project that was a different sport focus each week. So Nike brought in athletes correspond with each sport. So you had soccer, you did hockey, you did baseball, basketball, football, and was there one more? I'm not be missing one. And they brought in Scottie Pippen of the Bulls. They brought in Bo Jackson at the end, who I said earlier is one of my favorite guys of all time. They brought in Anthony Rizzo of the Cubs, and all these guys that were Nike athletes and specific to those sports. So Train Chicago was a great event, and it turned into Train Chicago 2.0, which was held downtown in the Michigan Avenue studio. And then there was the Get Out Here project, which got a lot of publicity, which Nike built this barge on the Chicago River, and they were conducting these outdoor workouts in December on the boat. It was a pretty cool event that has led to numerous projects since then, like Nike Detroit, and I've been very fortunate to be a part of it for a few years now.
So it's completely separate from BK Strength.
Yes, they recruited a bunch of different types of trainers to work there, more like programming events. So the Nike Training Club app on the phone is
Gotcha.
similar to the events that we would lead. There's more different training for kids or adults, usually sport or movement themed. And it's been a pretty cool team to be a part of for a long time. And I'm getting old though, so I don't know how much longer I have on the Nike shelf, but I appreciate everything that's happened in the past few years.
I was just going to ask you that if you were still going to, do projects with them for a while.
I hope so. If it's up to me, the answer is yes. So I hope that Nike, if you're listening, please keep me in the loop.
And then I had to make sure, and this is probably one of the things I'm most excited to ask you about, is your book, Walked On. Now, I know you shared a lot about your story, but I haven't asked you yet, like, what made you specifically want to write that book? Because it seems like it was a very intentional type of project.
It was something my parents had suggested I do for a while. And like, I don't think it's a great story because I didn't make it. My college football career sucked. I did not make it to the major leagues. I feel like a lot of people, at least myself, like I don't want to read a story about a guy that didn't make it. Like I know what that's like. I lived it. But as I started to work with some clients, and there were a couple of kids that were, one was a wrestler, one was a volleyball player that were playing in college, and their interactions with coaches were very similar to mine. And I probably am about 14 years older than them. I'm like, God, like this shit still happens. Like you still like some of these coaches they can ruin your career essentially, or alter your future if you're not doing what they want you to do. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, I should probably write a book about some of these stories that I've experienced. And I had a judo accident where I blew up my ankle and I needed surgery. So I was on the couch for about 6 to 8 weeks where I couldn't really do much other than sit. And then I'm not a guy that sits still well. So I'm like, well, if I'm going to be sitting home, I should probably start this project. So I have time to do it. And I sat at our computer. I drank a lot, which I'm not a big drinker. And I was going through like chapter by chapter how I thought it would look. So I think it was 2012 22 or 23 full book edits. And it was funny. I was looking for a publisher, and Nike actually referred me to a place downtown that specialized in sport books. And I'm talking about like social media. I listened to some of your other podcasts, and they basically told me they were not interested in promoting the book because I didn't have enough followers. I didn't have a blue check next to my name. I said, wait a minute. You haven't asked any questions about the book. You've read 0 samples about it. You are perceiving my worth to be defined by how many Instagram followers I have. And they're kind of like, yeah. So after I hired a team of people, my sister did a lot of the editing, the design. My aunt did a lot of the editing. I hired a guy, Jason Wright, who, if you've watched any White Sox baseball lately, they have a new Nike City Connect jersey. It's a south side across the chest. It's pretty badass. He designed that jersey and my book cover, and we went to self-publish through Amazon to get it all wrapped up together. So it was about 3 years of editing and work. And again, I'm not a real writer. I'm a trainer. So finding time to do it and really commit to it was challenging. Yeah, I think we all make time for what's important to us. That's like, man, it's been a long day. Do I have an hour to get this done? Because if it's not going to get done unless I choose to make it a priority.
And when you started, did you have any idea, or did you think that it was going to take a couple of years like it did?
No, I did not. I thought, oh, well, I'll just get this story out there and it's done. So the first phase was remembering the story. And I was lucky that in college, I had written some papers about what was happening while it was happening. That, of course, my mom and dad threw nothing away. Like, they still had them. I was reading them like, God, like, I was getting pissed reliving some of those same experiences. But I wanted to be able to tell a good story. Phase 1 was getting my memory in line, and phase 2 was adding some of the I would say, hopefully humorous anecdotes where I got smashed up pretty good, or things that I felt like made the story a little bit more exciting versus just like, then I went here and this sucked, then I went here and this sucked. And I was hoping that, again, that if the primary audience is young athletes or kids, or even some of my clients that didn't play sports, that when you stay locked into a goal under all circumstances, like it's just good things are bound to happen, right? If your process is good, and your results are crappy, eventually it'll swing back your way. So my hope is that people that read the book are inspired to follow goals at all times.
And so it sounds like part of the book too, though, is some behind the scenes stuff about what went on during that time, like not just the overcoming adversity part.
Sure. Yes, there was a lot of I try to add like little personal notes. So even when I played at Gary, my manager was Gary Templeton, and he was probably one of the best baseball coaches I ever had. And I mentioned a couple of times where like he stood up for me, which is not something that I got much of in college. So the differences between being a professional coach and a college coach are to me dramatically different. There was one time where, this is not in the book, but in minor league camp, Ozzie Guillen comes in to the minor league clubhouse. We have a meeting with him, and Ozzie is a Chicago legend. He played here for a long time. He won a World Series. He's a funny guy. People love Ozzie. And he says, somebody in this room is going to help me win a game sometime. Like, he gave this little speech in his broken Spanglish, which was full of swear words and cussing, that basically made everybody feel welcome with his team, even though we weren't quite in the big league clubhouse. He's like, people in this room are going to help me win sometimes. So I want to know you. I want you to know me. And compared to some of my college coaches, it's like, well, I had a totally different experience with that before. So I wanted the book to have evidence of Brian playing well and Brian not playing well. So again, how do you stay focused? How do you stay motivated when you aren't getting a chance to perform every day?
Awesome. And you've impacted so many people with not just your book, but your story in general. And is there anything that you have, any projects going on in the future that you can kind of tell the listeners about?
I've been trying to get the book in the hands of more kids of various sports. So I'm affiliated with a few different Chicago Elite Volleyball and newly Beat the Streets Wrestling in Chicago, and Lions Township Soccer Club, and some of the other baseball programs. I'm trying to be more proactive and reaching out to those programs to say, hey, I'd like to donate books, or you can buy books. So the book gets in the hands of people that I feel like need it the most. And with this weird ass year, scholarships are fewer because you got kids in college are staying on for another year. So there's more opportunities, I believe, to walk on to schools, and because the scholarships are not as available. So if you take a kid and say, okay, I'm going to walk on, what does that look like from a reality standpoint? So hopefully, again, the book can provide a little bit of insight for the parents too, right? Because like sometimes you see a movie like Rudy, right? Oh, Rudy walked on. Oh, he's a little guy from Joliet. Oh, he made his last play of college. He got a sack and maybe a fumble. Like, well, yeah, that's a nice ending, but he got smashed in practice every day too. Like, that's not fun. Credit to him for sticking it out and for being, a disciplined animal one of his time. But I think it's more fun to go where you play versus being, buried on the depth chart. So
100%. And so this is going to be the last part of the show. I want to give you the floor again for a few minutes. And if you can kind of leave the listeners with what it really takes to overcome adversities and struggles like you did.
I think you have to have a very strong belief in yourself. I think you have to have intrinsic motivation, where you're the kind of person that shows up every day to get your work in, and whether you're being told to or not. As a backup player, most of my post high school career, like it's my job to make sure that I'm ready. It's my job to get to the park early or to get to work early, get my body, my mind ready, and to, if I'm on the bench and the other catcher gets hit by a pitch in the neck, he's got to come out. I can't be like, oh no, I need to get loose. Like, I need to be loose. So I think some of that internal motivation of taking care of yourself under the team umbrella, of course, but like being ready to play. I say be ready so you don't have to get ready. And having the discipline to do it all the time, even when you don't have maybe a coach that's encouraging you to do so. Like, are you the kind of person that shows up when it's rainy, when it's cloudy, when it's cold, to get your work in, even though it isn't the most fun thing to do at that time? I feel like discipline is doing what you should be doing, even when it's not when you want to be doing. And, I read in college at Iowa, we read a book in a leadership class called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? By Stephen Covey. It's a classic. Yeah. And one of those habits was beginning with the end in mind, right? So if you have a goal in mind, and mine was to be a big league catcher, like, am I making choices? Do I have decisions that are putting me closer to that goal? If whatever the goal is, if the goal is weight loss, if I eat this deep dish pizza, is that helping me get there? And if you have the discipline and the mental toughness to stay on that path over a large sample size, I think a lot of those goals are attainable. So I really do believe that inner belief, it needs to be unshakable under all circumstances. So if there's one thing to learn from my experience, I think that if you believe in yourself, yeah, you have to have opportunities. Yes, you have to have some physical ability. I mean, I have a frame that's athletic, and I'm lucky that I'm skilled that way. You can't be like 5'2" and 300 pounds and believe in yourself, and it just happens, right? You have to. That's less likely to be the outcome. So belief in yourself and the habits on a daily basis to make it consistent go a long way. I mean, you've seen the same thing with your life. You found a way to dig into your discipline and get through some painful times.
Yeah, it's the discipline is kind of what kept me going. That's about it. There wasn't too much motivation a lot of the time, but the discipline, just like you said it perfectly.
Well, how did you find yours? How did you dig into it to overcome some of your adversity?
Yeah, so it came to the point, it was in my teenage years where, I looked around and saw where I was in my life and saw where my friends were, and, hit tons of different rock bottoms. And then finally I told myself, like, everything that happens to me from here on out, it's a decision. And so I made the decision at the time that no matter what happens, no matter how hard it is, that I'm going to keep going and improving and not go back to the life that I was living. So I had to, for me personally, I had to really let go of the victim mindset when I was a teenager, thinking how bad my situation was, like, I'm now responsible for everything that happens from here on out, at least the part that I can play. So for me, just like you said, it was the discipline and looking at it as a decision, not being a victim of the world. So
was there a day where you just kind of flipped the switch and you're like, oh, I'm going to Like, was there something that happened that got you from one mindset to the other?
A lot of stuff happened. Because
Or I
as
guess,
you
or was there something that happened that was where you decided enough was enough?
yes, but that exact mentality or that exact moment that happened 10 different times, as some of my listeners have, that know me or have seen in my story, I was homeless at times, addicted to heroin when I was a teenager. And so that moment of I can't do this anymore, it happened like going to jail, getting my freedom taken away. You have nowhere to live. So those things happen multiple times. And so finally there was the ending where no, I literally can't do this again, because I didn't think I was going to make it till I was convinced at one point I wouldn't make it to 20 years old. And like I was okay with that. That's how bad it got. So after so many of those different situations that happened, I had to come to the point where I had to stop blaming, you know, whatever it was, my upbringing, my past, my situation, and just own the rest of my life. But it took like 10 of those moments though, unfortunately. I guess I was a little bit stubborn.
I find that to be extremely inspiring, to have beaten a heroin addiction and to, come back from being homeless as a young kid and deciding to change your life around for the better. I mean, I find that to me fires me up. Like, my story as an athlete, like, that's, come on, that's easy compared to what you've gone through. So I'm not wearing a hat, but I would tip my cap to you for digging in and making decisions to improve your life.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that. And, along the way, I was very fortunate that there was random people along the way that, like let me stay on their couch or at their house or in a car or whatever it was. So I was very fortunate to have that, because I'm well aware some people didn't have that at all. So I definitely owe part of that to the people that helped me out. So, but I really appreciate it though. And for the listeners that are either looking to connect with you or purchase your book, where can they go do that?
All right. So the book is through Amazon, but it's best to get it through my website first, which is bkstrength.com. I am on Instagram. I really despise social media, but it's kind of a business card that everybody needs to have. And if you're using the old Instagram machine, I'm at bkstrength_Chicago. There's times where people send me messages and I don't even know that they're there. So as a grown man trying to navigate the social media world, I apologize if I am very delayed in responding to you or at all. So emailing me is probably a more direct route, which is on my website as well. But if you get out to Instagram and find my page, please recognize it. It takes me a while. It's not a huge priority for me, so it does take a while to get back.
And I'll make sure to link all those in the show description. So someone, if they want to go purchase your book or email you instead of Instagram.
Please.
And thank you everyone for listening to the Mission Driven Made podcast. If you found value in this, please subscribe to the show. Take just a few seconds and leave a 5-star review. And of course, share it with a friend. As always, we appreciate all the support that you've given the brand so far. And Brian, thank you for all the value you brought today, for all the listeners and sharing your story. It was great talking to you and getting to know you today. And until next time, everyone, stay mission driven.